Good day, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to News in Focus. My name is Faraz Patel. I'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us here on Hilaal TV, DSTV channel 347. If you haven't followed these two gentlemen, then maybe you should have. Well, you have the opportunity to learn about them and understand them today. They made a trip to Palestine just as recent as last week as they conducted an understanding of the occupation that is currently happening in this land. This comes at a time, of course, as famine and starvation continues to grip Gaza, and the genocide shows no signs of stopping. Joining me online, I'd like to welcome Nkosi Zulu, who's coming to us from Durban, and in studio, he's been conducting a lot of interviews, so we've also brought him here as he was part of the team that made that trip to Palestine, Pieter Kriel. Pieter, I want to start off with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
Yeah.
I think it's important to start off with saying that when we went to Palestine, we had one objective, and that was to bring back the truth to South Africans, because we think they had a great understanding of how to resonate with the story as people who have lived through apartheid. So I think South Africans can empathize well with the story, and we are looking forward to giving it to South Africa and the world.
Yeah. Nkosi, good day to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Nkosi, before the trip was obviously being conducted, before and after, how much has this changed for you?
Well, I first would like to greet the viewers at home and greet you, Rose, and thanks for having us on this platform on your television channel. And look, there's quite a lot of changes that are brought back from this expedition in Palestine, and it actually changed us a lot. I mean, the way we view the world and the way we view, all the systemic contemplations throughout the world. Coming from the background of being, a normal person in KwaZulu-Natal, having grown up in the farm areas, and it basically I derived a lot from the trip, and I derived a lot from the experiences there. It gives us a huge indication of how the world outside of our little world is operated, and as much as it was not like a very nice holistic experience, but it actually giving us, myself and my colleague Pete, something to look into and to actually motivate us that we should carry on doing the humanitarian work that we are doing, because to be honest, we can't be having what we are having in Gaza and in West Bank in 2025.
Gents, obviously there's a paradoxical take on all of this, and I'm glad that this conversation is happening because each of us are from different race groups and each of us were affected by apartheid differently. Of course, for you, Nkosi, as a Black African, you were affected probably more than what I would have been affected, or maybe least that of Pieter. And this is where, of course, the understanding of what's happening in Palestine really comes into the picture. That as a Black African going into Palestine, you have already the sense of understanding of how occupation is, what apartheid is, and what resistance means. Whereas for you, Pieter, you've come from a background where obviously apartheid was normalized, it was accepted. It was a sense of, listen, if you are less than maybe what a white person would be, forget about it, don't worry about it, understand you've got your privilege, just appreciate your privilege. Nkosi, I want to come to you as a Black African. When you entered Palestine and when you understood what the occupation is, how did that resonate with you and how did that give you a fuller understanding?
Yeah, well, for us, I must tell you, one of the main reason that we went to Palestine was to basically expedite or draw parallels of apartheid and make comparisons with the South African context of apartheid. So I will be very honest and tell you that the moment because we went to Jordan, in Jordan, obviously, everything is happy there, and the people there, as much as the most of the people in Jordan are also Palestinians. they long to go and see their families. But then there's this Israeli border, which is a horror to basically find yourself into. But then what I picked up immediately was the way I was treated as compared to my fellow Pete and Desiree, our other counterpart. I mean, the way we were treated was, it suddenly shakes off the South African context of apartheid, whereby the white person will always be treated better than the black person. So it would always be, in South African context, it would always be the black person that is a suspect. But immediately when we hit the border, going from Jordan to West Bank, Pete was a suspect, and I was like, goodness, in this part of the world, a white man is a suspect and a black man is a question. That was the first thing I picked up, and going right into it, even with the treatment of the people there. So when they see myself as a black person, they don't have this whole superiority complex type of thing. They integrated me, they welcomed me as a black person, but then it was very difficult for us to experience such in the outside world. While in my own country, in South Africa, I'll be with the white people, and I'll always be pointed out as if I'm a foreigner. And even in the context of the occupation, it's very real and it's very so South African. It's actually the very same thing that the apartheid government in South Africa was doing. It's the occupation of the Palestinian land. You must know that we've been taken off our places and our land have been occupied. So it's the very same thing that is happening in Palestine. The Israelis, they just go, they identify the fertile place and the fertile, or the strategic place, and they put their flag up there. They put the shacks, and then the Israeli government funds them to actually just occupy that land. And he basically arms them to sort of like provoke the people of Palestine. And even with the separation of areas, Area A, Area C, which obviously was according to that Oslo Accord that was adopted, but it basically does not give Palestinian people freedom to their own land, which is what we are still fighting about in South Africa. We want our land back. In 20 years down the line, the Palestinian people will be wanting their land back from the settlers if we don't stop this occupation.
Nkosi, I want to bring Pieter into this. So Pieter, you taken in, Nkosi is mentioning, of course, and you told me off air that you were taken in as a suspect. It's a very rare occasion. So how did it sit with you at that time? The Israeli army takes you in and says, we need to ask you questions.
Well, I think it's a strange feeling because coming from a country where a white person used to be least on the suspect list, I think having that in my head, I thought we would be questioned for being South African and going in. But I think I was stopped for having the largest following base, and perhaps because I openly speak about apartheid and segregation and injustice and so on. So I think I might have been flagged beforehand. But it was a strange experience because they separated me from Nkosi Zulu as well as my partner, who was our camera assistant, for like 30, maybe 40 minutes. And it was stressful because they asked me invasive questions. And it's just... But you have to stay calm. That's the thing.
Of course,
If you give them too much information, that's ammunition. So I just answered their questions because Nkosi reminded me I'm someone who I like to explain myself. So I'll give too much information. And I try to keep calm.
Nkosi, before we go to the break, Pieter was telling me off air that the lines for the Palestinians to enter their own homeland is as long as you could ever imagine. It was the same with apartheid, whether you were Black African or Indian. If you wanted to go to a human right, which is going to the toilet or even getting water, those were the same lines, or trying to collect documents which you needed. There was sort of like a reminder there, wasn't there, whether it was told by your parents or your grandparents, just how much of a resonation that was in the year that we are in 2025.
Truthfully so. It's like I really operated in for at least 10 or 12 days while I was there, because me understanding that, back then, prior to 1994, as I was young, but I will be wanting to catch a bus to town with my mom for whatever reasons, and you will see these long queues, It's like black people have always been subjected to these long queues and everything. You would want to go and buy bread with this long queue. And I'm looking at these people in Palestine, and they are there with all the resources in 2025. And they're subjected to these long queues with women and young kids, and like basically infants. They're with the suitcases trying to cross this border, and they're subjected to these Israeli soldiers, the scrutiny, the way that they are spoken to, the way that they are treated. And I'm like, goodness, this is like a pre-1994 type of situation in South Africa. It's very sad, because as I've said, there are so many Palestinians that are living in Jordan. Trying to cross into West Bank is a problem, and trying to come out of West Bank is a problem. So I feel very sorry for the people of Palestine, and I don't think it should be happening in 2025. There should actually be better and much more, efficient mechanisms of trying to eliminate what is happening there.
After the break, we continue this conversation with Pieter, Kriel and Nkosi Zulu on their trip to Palestine. Do stay tuned. We'll have more for you after this break. Welcome back to News in Focus. Pieter, I want to come to you. So you visited Nablus, Jericho, if I stand to be corrected, Ramallah. What were the other cities that you...
We did
Hebron,
Bethlehem,
Jerusalem.
And we did a lot of villages in and surrounding all of these
Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So you'd be driving in a major city like Bethlehem, and you'd see everything the world knows, right? You'd see stores and shops and people at least trying to make a living. But just 100 or 200 meters down, you'd find a road down that takes you into a village. And you see the saddest conditions you'd ever see in your life. You see people, a lot of people living in very small, crammed in places. And
like the Bantus.
Like the Bantustans, but I'd say very dense, because there's not so much space on hilltops and on going down hills. So they actually build on top of each other. And you'd actually see some people living in the hallways of the streets, building little houses and sleeping there. But the saddest thing is walking down these village streets and seeing young children telling you stories, taking your hand and telling you stories of their brother or their nephew being shot about a week or 2 weeks ago, simply for being in the midst of other protesters during Israeli settler raids into these villages, where they basically just humiliate and harm and act disgustingly towards Palestinians.
Nkosi, how much of the understanding of the apartheid Bantustans did you get an idea of visiting these villages? When you go there, when you hear, and you've mentioned it, the olive trees which are being seized by Israeli settlers or the Israeli army, and done so in the name of the Israeli government, when children are being shot just for taking stones to resist occupation tanks, occupation guns. How much did that resonate when you hear the stories of how South African police service or security branch police service would do the very same thing to many black African townships during the days of apartheid?
The levels of resonance in terms of myself as a black South African, it doesn't even, to me, tickle the fact that we, as South African government or whatever, the structure that was put to put up the ICJ case, I don't think we are doing enough as South Africans to basically shout out to the world to say the Palestinian people must be free, because we live that experience. I think if we can take all the South Africans to go and visit West Bank and Gaza, for that matter, they wouldn't want to come back. I promise you, for us, they wouldn't want to come back to South Africa. They would want to stay there and fight, because there will be there's no way that we can resonate with what is taking place in the West Bank, as we speak, West in Gaza. So Even with the occupation of farms and the sabotage that is done by the settlers, they are basically poisoning the soil so that people of Palestine cannot be self-sufficient in terms of consistent farming, what you call, they're surviving from those farms, and now the settlers, they come and invade and they come and they occupy their farms. They are not even allowed to go and take care of the crops that have been planted there, after this whole October 7 thingy. And it's very sad that you can go into the people, in the people's land or the people's country, and you start restricting their movement. You start to put checkpoints all around the city, and then you tell them that you can only move in area A, and in area B you can only do this, and area C it's out of their authority. And this is their land we are talking about. In South Africa, we had the very same thing. We were treated as foreigners in our own land, where we had to carry bomb passes and particular times at which we would not be required to be found in such areas, in some areas. And that infuriates me, because myself as an activist, myself as a union leader, I fight for the rights of the workers. I fight for the rights of the children. I want, a developmental and a progressive state. And through such, we always echo and we preach socialism in terms of, wanting everyone. We want everyone to be, like how my friend Pete was saying earlier, that, you have these cramped up houses where the Palestinian people are just thrown, like dogs, and they are not even able to be given jobs, sufficient jobs. They are not even being given, their rights of movement and the rights to farm. And it's just, I don't know how to explain. It's inhumane. It's inhumane. It's basically what took place in South Africa before 1994. It's what we fought for. It's what we fought against. And to think that it's taking place in 2025 in Palestine, and we are keeping quiet in South Africa, I don't think we are doing too much. I don't think we are doing enough. So some of the reasons we went up there was so that we come back here and we make noise about this. South African, more especially Black South African, they should be the ones that are making a lot of noise, echoing the voices of freedom. I can tell you just in a brief that I went and I visited the statue of Mandela, which is situated in Ramada.
Yes.
It's a very nice city, so like Cape Town city, and there are people there, they're enjoying themselves and they're going on as if, there's nothing taking place outside of, area A. And I was very, very, very sad to see the people happy sitting around the statue of Mandela, and yet there's something so bad that is taking place or that is happening to their people.
Yeah, Nkosi, let me bring in Pieter here, because, gents, obviously what we're seeing now is famine and starvation in Gaza, and Pieter was telling me a story about how the children are probably the most accommodating you've ever met, and when you see what's happening in Gaza, it's the same Palestinians. It breaks your heart, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Entering Palestine, you are met with a different kind of hospitality. You hear taxi drivers or people who ride buses or drive buses just wanting to hear where you're from, who your family is, what your job is, why are you in Palestine, just wanting to listen to your story, right? And you'd stop somewhere for a break because it's warm, and they'd buy you some water, and they'd refuse to take money for it because they want you to have water. We went to the Dead Sea one day, and it was about 1 kilometer's walk down because we didn't go to a private beach. We wanted the experience, and it was 43 degrees Celsius. So we walked down, and we had a very tough time coming back up. We almost got heat stroke, and a taxi driver actually helped us out so much. He took us to a place where we could get some services and put our heads underwater. We were at a cafe once, and we were just there to get some internet because we were on the move and we had to travel and get to different interviews. And a young boy working there just came to us and offered us a warm dessert and refused
Palestinian
to take... Palestinian boy. He refused to take our money for it. All he wanted to know was, what was our names, where we're from, and will we please join them for breakfast the next day. That's all they wanted.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Nkosi, I'm sure you've got a very similar story to that. As you see, of course, this genocide in Gaza that's happening, when you see, you've seen this picture of this boy, Amir, who kissed the hand of this GHF worker who gave him a very small grain of rice, only to be killed by an Israeli military official moments later. That, because I know we have to excuse you, that along with the educational part, and I'm going to give you some time just to conclude on that. How important is it for South Africans to be educated not only from your trip, but also from the scenes and the videos and the footage that are being shown of the suffering of the people in Gaza?
Feroz, we connect quite well with such experiences because, in our apartheid years, we were basically also, starved or almost basically malnutrition. But you see, like, I'm going to keep on repeating this phrase that, in 2025, we're not supposed to be seeing side. And, when we visited, there's I think Pete was referring to, we visited a village whereby the Israeli soldiers were demolishing those houses because they wanted that place. And there's been demolitions in that village, and the people are so resilient. They're rebuilding such houses, their houses. And they still offered us coffee in the very nice cups. They offered us coffee. And I'm thinking to myself while I'm sitting there, these people still have, the passion to offer us coffee because we're there with our guides and stuff. And immediately, like a day after, we heard that there were the guys from that village were shot at the 15-year-old. Yeah. Now that is not what we want to see in these days. And also, Feroz, there's this thing of linking it to education. I met principals, I met teachers there, and they were telling me exactly how difficult it is for them to conduct their job, because obviously there's these checkpoints whereby the kids are unable to go through, and even some teachers are like given, curfews on when to come and when not to come. It's very bad. It's very bad. And I cannot not mention the story of this Turkish young girl that was there as a journalist that got shot by the Israeli soldier in the South Asia. Just because she was in the midst of the people resisting to give up their occupation by the settlers, and he was just there, and unfortunately he was shot. So she was shot, and the people of the world should be speaking against such. We could have been, myself and Pieter and the camera lead, we could have been shot there at any time we were there. So it's very bad for us.
Nkosi, absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Feroz. Thanks for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. That's Nkosi Zulu, social activist. Of course, he's bidding us farewell. But we still have Pieter Kriel, who's going to take us through the rest of this conversation too. Stay tuned. Okay, welcome back to News in Focus. So we still continue the conversation, but I'm now with Pieter Kriel just to discuss looking from within inside South Africa and, of course, where we are as a country. Pieter, not a lot of, you've obviously garnered a lot of support, but you've garnered a lot of criticism also. Gillian Schuster, you've read her articles. I just wanted to get your response to her because she's labeled you as, quote unquote, what if you are Helen Zille's latest boy puppet? I want to get your response to that.
Yes, so first of all, I didn't take the time to read her article, but I was sent the article and some opinions on it. Look, I respect anyone's opinion when it comes down to being authentic in the messaging, and that I'll leave up to the audience to determine. But I think for her to comment on our trip to Palestine, which was an authentic trip to bring truth back to South Africa from the comfort of her couch, is, in my opinion, not authentic. It's bad to the cause that we as people are fighting for, especially for human dignity and social justice and equality. I think that, and I'm speaking as a leftist, I think that the left has become people who attach themselves to a kind of identity politics and refuse to believe that certain people can speak out their own personal experience. I've never once said that I've spoken for black people, for colored people, for people of color. I speak alongside them because I align my philosophy on truth and justice. And if black people or colored people or people of color align with that truth, so be it. Yeah.
There must be, and this is where I'm going to praise you, Pieter, because when we speak of white privilege, the easiest thing to do is to sit back in your couch. You could be enjoying whatever drinks that it is that you enjoy, watching whatever sport that you want to enjoy. You could shut yourself completely from what is happening in the country right now, where unemployment is bordering on 40%. Nobody really knows what's going to happen with South Africa given the trade tariffs that have been imposed by the United States, because it affects a lot of industries, number two. And number three, you could have, using the privilege of apartheid, using who you are, you could have said, well, I don't really care about the next person. So why did Pieter Kriel say, no, it just can't be that way? When I started seeing your videos from February, March, when you took on AfriForum for what they did in the United States, that was something refreshing. Talk to us about that.
Yes. So, you know what? When I speak about people like refugees, I speak about people that come from Congo, from Zimbabwe. We have two clear distinctions to make. What are they running away from, and what did they run into when they got here, right? What did the South African refugees run away from? They ran away from a government that still gives them land, that still gives them the right to participate equally in the economy, right? But they hold on to a nostalgic idea of what they want South Africa to look like. And they are getting that in the United States, a white nationalist Christian utopia, if you may. My fight in everything I speak for is the South African struggle, not just from pre-1994, but after 1994, because we've seen political freedom, but we've not seen the economic emancipation of the majority of South Africans. And I think that fight ties directly back to, let's say, the Palestinian cause and the largest humanitarian displacement crisis going on in Sudan. When one person is suffering, whether it's in South Africa or in Congo or in Palestine, we're all suffering. We're human beings, and we need to challenge and tamper and practice our empathy, because we're the only species that can actually have empathetic reasoning on that level.
Sure. And that's where it comes down to, Pieter, because who you are as an Afrikaner, South African, given the privileges that were enjoyed by almost every Afrikaner, South African in apartheid, it's very difficult to have these conversations, because they would say, oh, why are you bringing up the past? But here you are saying it's important to bring up a past to understand where South Africa is in 2025. That trip to Palestine, for example, when you look at many Afrikaner rhetorics in South Africa, that obviously bring up Hamas, they would bring up the October the 7th attacks, they would bring up that would be it. That would be their drawing line into the current genocide that is happening in Gaza. And why was it important for you as a white Afrikaner to say, no, it's not the case? If you go to the West Bank, where Hamas is not active, you see what is happening there. The Israeli Knesset has passed a resolution to annex the land within the West Bank. So how important was it for you to say, as somebody standing out, this is not the case that is happening?
Look, I grew up hearing about apartheid. I learned about it in textbooks and through statistics and things like that. I'm a very empirical person, so I've never had first-hand look at what apartheid could look like, even as a white person. So going to Palestine, I wasn't under apartheid. I still had the privilege of my passport and my skin color. But you see the checkpoints, you see the pass laws, you see police hostilities against innocent civilians, and militarized presence in civilian neighborhoods where soldiers spit on children and point guns at them, right? You see that, you notice that. So to me, that was very critical to my journey, because I can directly correlate that back to the South African experience that I was taught, right? But going to Palestine changed something in me. It made me realize that my mission is bigger than politics. I don't think politics is what's important to the world right now. I think it's human rights activism.
Yes.
We need to stand up for people that are suffering, people that don't have human dignity, and that is what I will be using my platform for the next few years.
In Nazi Germany, there was Colonel von Stauffenberg who led a rebellion to try and assassinate Hitler at the time. Here in South Africa, not much though. A lot of the white South Africans would join the African National Congress of various movements. A lot of Jewish individuals, like for example Ronnie Kasserls, who joined the ANC to fight the apartheid government, and is still a huge voice for the cause of the Palestinian people. When you look at yourself, the isolation, you've mentioned that you were being criticized from within your own community. How does that make you feel at this moment? Do you feel isolated, or do you feel there's a cause that is bigger than just the community that I represent?
Definitely bigger, because I'll tell you this, even though I've garnered a lot of support using my social media platforms, I still sometimes feel like I'm the most loneliest person in the world, because even though I have many people surrounding me, I don't necessarily always think that they understand the bigger cause, right? There is a level of danger that comes with this, right? And I'm not talking about violence and threats of violence. I'm talking about, to your friends and to your family members. They lose friends and family members because of your opinion and because of the things that you stand for, especially coming from a very conservative community where everyone knows everyone. But to me, losing, even if it is people from my own community, it shows how important and how necessary my work is. Because I believe in having conversations that put you outside of your comfort zone, because only then you can grow as a human being.
AfriForum, Orania, I've had interviews with them, right? And I've challenged them on a number of aspects with regards to their visit to US President Donald Trump when he was his first term in 2018, and of course their visit to him now. If you read the Constitution, if you read how they acted as a rogue organization, not representing government, because there was supposed to be a representative from the Department of International Relations accompanying them or getting a go-ahead from them. They didn't do that. When you see their actions, when you see what the discussions were with regards to US President Donald Trump, especially Kriel, and when I saw his name, I thought you had some sort of relations, but you mentioned that you're the complete opposite to him.
Yes.
What was your take immediately then? Because that's when, of course, you came out and did a number of media interviews. What is your take on organizations like AfriForum or Solidarity or even Orania, which isolates himself completely from the broader South African context?
Yeah, well, look, going to Palestine, I've realized that settler colonialists usually start by expanding through outposts and setting up individualistic communities. So I think the South African government has to pay closely attention to what is happening in Orania, because that is settler colonialism in its finest form. I'm not saying because they're white Afrikaners. White Afrikaners don't have the right to go back to England or Germany or the Netherlands. They've developed their culture here. We've developed our culture here. So let's fight it out here. Let's debate about it. Let's create a more equal and equitable society. But don't create divisive and pro-nationalistic towards the Afrikaner people enclaves within South Africa, because I see what happened in Palestine. I see how within a matter of days Palestinian land can turn into a settler outpost.
Yes.
So I think let's be careful about that. Let's garner and create a more fair South African identity. Let's stop holding on to dangerous, nostalgic ideas.
After the break, I wrap up my conversation with Pieter Kriel on the conversation. Of course, we had one on Palestine, but his take on what is currently happening within South Africa. Do stay tuned. Welcome back to News in Focus. I'm wrapping up my conversation with Pieter Kriel. Pieter, I want to touch on where we are now in South Africa, because obviously with this government of national unity, there's been such splits that are occurring at this moment. You've got, of course, the far right who are crying out that they're still being oppressed. I'm talking about a small pocket of the Afrikaner community, white community. And then, of course, you've got the far left that are saying, get over it. And at this very moment, I want to bring in something that you mentioned with regards to rugby, where you said, we're not going to solve this over the Springboks winning the World Cup. That's euphoria. It lasts 2 or 3 days, and after that, boom, it's done. This land issue, and a lot of the contestation is with regards to the land issue. There's still a few people that have hold on this land. I know that the ANC government had 30 years to solve it. They haven't. They've, of course, brought in the land expropriation bill. I just want to touch on that. What is your take on why it's important for the land to have a fairer redistribution?
Yeah, well, look, I think that Nelson Mandela has given the South African people equality, right? We're equal on paper. But in terms of equity, that is still a facade. We've not seen equity be distributed to the masses. So that, in that regard, I do mean that when I say that it's so necessary to redistribute the land, I mean the means of production, I mean the means of job creation in creating sustainable land where people can create sustainable means of income and sustainability and so forth. What I think has happened for the past 30 years, the ANC, as well as the Democratic Alliance in the Western Cape, they've managed poverty. They've not created sustainable means of improving lives. What they've done is they've created grants, which I totally agree with. People should have temporary relief. That's grants.
Sure.
But what the government has failed in doing is creating sustainability after that.
Right.
And now I think when we talk about the land, I think it's a very necessary act. It needs to be redistributed so that everyone can have the same amount of equity and means.
Sure.
I made a quote this morning. Sometimes equality is not just about starting on the same line. It's about dismantling the idea that certain people are the track and other people are the hurdles.
That's right.
So we have to break that down first, because the decolonization of the mind is much more important than the decolonization of the land. You can only decolonize the land once you've decolonized the mind.
Using that in mind, do you still feel that many of the whites in South Africa are understanding that? Because when you're in a sense of privilege, you sit back and you have that sense of luxury.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you, and I know you're just one person and you have that voice to make it happen, but from the sense that you are understanding, is there a necessity of change that many of the previously advantaged South Africans, do they want to take it? Because it's very difficult to break that privilege just like that.
Yeah. Look, equality always looks like oppression to the people who've previously had privilege. And I think that's why I say decolonization and deconstruction of the mind is important. You cannot have a person who've had immense privilege for 50 or 60 years give away their house or their land willingly and still actively participate in an economy after that with satisfaction or with willpower, because they've lost that privilege, and that privilege is tied to their identity. You break them as a person. That's why I say you have to empathize with people. You have to teach them the deconstruction methods of realizing that sometimes privilege is not just how much you have in the bank. It's sometimes white privilege is the assurance of correctness, surely because you're white and you hold the position and the skin color that you have. You need to debunk the myths that white people are smarter than people of color or black people that were created in eugenic factories and in nostalgic worldviews. You have to deconstruct education that have been taught in Western sense. You need a universal, humane way of teaching education. We're still under the colonial education system. Yeah. So I don't know how to approach that.
Yeah, I mean, I want to touch on, the economic freedom fighters had this slogan called kill the boer, kill the farmer. And when you listen to the courts, it was ruled that this is a apartheid song sang to obviously hit back at the oppressor. You've had the likes of AfriForum and various Afrikaner organizations saying that, listen, this is race bait. US President Donald Trump and President Cyril Ramaphosa obviously visited him, used that song also. But again, President Donald Trump in many aspects has in his own little bubble by himself. I just wanted to get your take on that, because that there is just scratching the surface of a lot of the disunity South Africans are having at this moment. Still in farms, there are many black African workers that are being ill-treated by many of their bosses, which are still the white Afrikaner farmers, number one. And yet, nothing is being mentioned on that, number one, on a larger scale. And then number two, racist words, I beg your pardon, are still being thrown around in the year 2025.
Yeah, look, I think it's important to approach this with empathetic reasoning and look at it objectively. If people of color have to be okay with white people proudly singing the stem more proudly than the other parts of the national anthem, and that being tied to direct violence towards people of color during apartheid, why, in the right context, should people not be able to sing "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer"? But with saying that, I always say that just like we have statues of Verwoerd, it's a historical statue. It should be able to teach you something of history, and you should be able to learn something from it. You shouldn't not have it and not see it, but it should be in right context, either as a monument in a museum, as a piece of history and something to learn from. So we should be able to, in the right context, at political events or during a presentation of a struggle, we should be able to use "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer" in right context, but never as an incitation to violence.
Yeah, I was going to bring up when I had Mr. Strydom from Oranje. I mean, they have Bas of Verwoerd, Strydom, and he says, well, it's part of our history. And I asked him, well, how could it be part of our history when those are the same figures that led apartheid? And there was a time, Pieter, that when I went to, I was taking a road trip to Durban, I saw somebody wearing a jacket. He was a biker, and the old apartheid flag was still on him. And I thought to myself, how could this be the case? There are many within the communities of white South Africans that still hold on to apartheid. They show images of how beautiful South Africa was at the time, and they say, look at us, look at how apartheid was run under the National Party government. When you look at the ANC, they have destroyed it. Now, yes, the ANC is part and parcel of what has happened in South Africa and some of the decay, but to use and glorify apartheid, and that's what I want to ask you. I mean, that again is not only showing a sense of its white privilege, but number two, glorifying something which still today hurts so many people.
Yes, absolutely. Look, I think when this group of Afrikaners, or when this group of white people, people who've had privilege in the past, approach this, they approach this from a pedestal of privilege. They know they still have something to hold on to. I relate that back to the Afrikaner refugees a few months back. A refugee, a person who fleds war or economic persecution or whatever, doesn't line up at the airport with 3 or 4 big suitcases and leaves behind a 5-bedroom house. That's not what a refugee is. So that's why I say it's so important to, if we want to have a common ground in South Africa, and if we want to be able to sit together in the same room and speak the same language all South Africans understand, a language of understanding the struggle and one that has lived the struggle, right? We can find a way towards common ground and build this country up. The government is to blame. The ANC is to blame, at least half of it. But half of the blame is on the South African citizens who've waited for a savior to fix this problem, knowing that unity is more dangerous than corruption. We just don't want to act on it.
To wrap up this conversation, Pieter, where are we? How does Pieter Kriel see South Africa now in 2025? There's a government of national unity. They are having own political conundrums themselves. We are now having commissions of inquiries, another one now into police corruption. And South Africans don't feel safer now because of that, but South Africans also don't feel safer about the future of this country when you have a GNU that is speaking on different terms, and then you have pockets of civil society groups or lobby groups that are displaying a sense of disunity. Is unity still a facade right now in South Africa? Can we still hold on to it? And where are we as a country 2025 and beyond?
Yes, I think unity is something we long stopped looking for. That's why I compare it always to rugby games and to soccer games. We get along in the stadium,
Sure.
but once we get outside of the stadium and that oxytocin and a bit of adrenaline has kicked off, we're back to hating each other. We're back to fighting and swearing at each other. And that is because we've not had the right structures of how to approach different communities and the effects of apartheid. Because let's be honest, there's trauma on every side of apartheid. As people who didn't live apartheid, as white people, we feel a sense of responsibility in trying and fix the mistakes of our grandfathers or our parents, because how do we fit into the South African image if we don't actively try?
Yes.
And I think it comes, every different demographic community approaches it like that. I just think we should stop glorifying rugby and the bread and circuses, right? We shouldn't dismantle rugby players. We have great athletes.
Yes.
We have great cricket players. But let's focus on human rights and activism and fostering a better community and society for all who live in it. Because how can I fully enjoy a rugby game knowing that there are 40 million other South Africans struggling to feed their families? That's not how it works.
Pieter, absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Pieter Kriel, a social and human rights activist. And of course, earlier on, we had part of this conversation, Nkosi Zulu, who accompanied Pieter on their trip to Palestine. Many lessons that they had learned from that. Well, that's all we have for you on News in Focus from myself, Hospitaal, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.